everyone. This is Diane Rasmussen with UK Column. I'm really happy to be joined today by Chris Dobson, who I'm really happy to say is going to be a new contributor to UK Column. He's got some interesting things to talk about that he'll be covering over the next little while, both in written and in podcast form. But I think since he's here with me, I will just let him do his own introduction. So Chris, again, welcome to UK Column. What would you like to tell everyone about yourself?
Hello, Diane. Firstly, it's a great honour to be a contributor to UK Column now. I've been watching the column for a few years, since the COVID fiasco, and it's great to be working with you all. So I suppose you want a little bit of a backstory for the audience?
Yes, please.
Okay. I originally come from the world of art and antiques restoration. I started in 1985. I established a studio to actually reconstruct and then later restore armour and edged weapons. And as time went on, I began doing more and more restoration. And my scholastic approach to the work was rewarded with me being granted the position of Master Armourer to the Royal Armouries at the Royal Armouries Museum in Leeds. I did a stint there. But I've been working in, around and for museums for about 40 years now in the field initially of applied arts, working with arms and armour, and then I moved into graphic art, paintings, and then sculpture and even architecture. And that's what I'm going to be bringing to the UK Column. A little more of that in a moment. First of all, I think you wanted to know how I actually got here. And my story is the same as a lot of contributors to the column. I effectively said no to the wrong person, and that got me cancelled in a way I was never expecting. I started off, as I said, working on armour. So I said no to that particular person, and that was when my work in the antiques field came under attack very heavily. And as time went on, I lost more and more and more clients. And that pushed me into more writing, and that came under attack as well. So in the end, publication after publication, not good. But I'd been looking at art since I started really as a form of reference for my work on arms and armour. And paintings aren't photographs, but they are extremely useful for studying that sort of thing. And I fell in love with the art itself. I visited Florence for the first time in 1991, and for various reasons I'd never really felt at home anywhere in the world before then, and that was when I thought, home, that's it. And I began really studying the art then. And then quickly back to how I came to you. I began, since my publications had come under attack, I then began producing podcasts, which predictably came under attack from the same people. And so it just pushed me more and more and more in that direction. And when the COVID thing hit, I had originally foolishly been watching the BBC and other corporate media. And then I began, looking at more alternative media online, and I came across the UK Column. I came across people like James Delingpole on Odyssey, and my reaction when I was looking at you guys was, frankly, should I even be looking at this stuff? Am I safe doing it, or am I going to wind up on a government list? Not realising I already was, but not for any heinous crime, simply for saying no to the wrong person. So I wound up becoming a guest on various podcasts, as we've discussed previously. And that led to Germ Warfare, now on the UK Column, James Delingpole, and this. This is it, finally. I made a pitch to the column about wanting to promote something which is about positivity, which is about natural, God-given human creativity in this time where we're getting absolutely assaulted to drive everything online, to have our natural culture, our art, our history driven from us. That's why I pitched the idea to the column, and I'm honoured to have been accepted by you.
Well, it's really great to have you here because, as our audience will know, for those who have been watching us for a while, with my background in library science and information science, and I went through similar stories as well, which people can find in other places. But ultimately, I really feel like one of the things that they're trying to do, as you will know from your area of the world as well, a museum, which is really not that far from libraries, actually, is that one of the things that we need to be doing and that we were trained to do is to preserve culture, preserve history. And even if history wasn't perfect in the past, which it never is, the idea is that if we don't preserve it, we can't learn from the past to make a better future. So I think that this can be potentially looked at as part of the agenda of when we talk about the issues of decolonization, which we won't get into in detail in here, but basically this idea that we're destroying the history of Western civilization and Western culture by attacking cultural institutions like libraries and museums. So it's really great to hear, and I know we've discussed this, that you'll be taking a positive approach, because the more that we talk about things that are positive of the beauty and the aesthetics of art and sculpture, and for me written words, is that's one of the things that we can do to fight the things that are being forced upon us. So thank you so much for bringing your knowledge and your skills to the column. We really appreciate your help.
Okay. Well, look, I've been writing about Florentine art and history, as you'll see behind me, a few titles, since 2000 now. And what we're going to do, this is partly a response to this ludicrous idea of Tartaria and looking at all these neoclassical buildings and saying people couldn't have built those with hammers and chisels and their bare hands. They couldn't have done it. This is nonsense. This is a deliberate tactic, I think, in the overall strategy of destroying our culture, of just saying that ordinary human beings simply couldn't have built these things. Well, yes, they could. Yes, they did. They created absolutely stunning paintings, amazing sculpture, and what I'm going to do in the podcasts that we're going to be covering over the next months is I'm going to be showing absolute masterworks. And because I started life as a craftsman and an artist, and I'm going to explain how they were made. It's as simple as that, because humans made them. And my work was carried out literally with hammers and a forge originally. And if you can do that with metal, fire, and a hammer, you can create absolute wonders if you were working in the studios of some of the great Renaissance masters in Florence. It's an amazingly creative world. So what we're going to do is we're going to start for the first 3 shows in Florence itself, and we're going to look at the birth of the Florentine Renaissance, how it started, the fact that it could have happened really only because of the money there. So out of the banking, out of the merchant class, the oligarchy that ruled Florence, they poured money into art as a form of patronage, as a form of political power. And that, incidentally, is reflected in paintings, as in Paolo Uccello's San Romano so-called series of 3. I would differ. And an artist might be commissioned by somebody, say, in the Medici family, to produce a work of art which might only be displayed in private rooms, might be displayed publicly with an overt political message. And sometimes, this is the amazing thing, because these people were making so much money at the time, particularly from banking, which was usury and so a mortal sin to Catholics, they endowed works of art as a way of buying themselves literally out of hell. So we have some of these extraordinary works of art purely because of the sheer fear that these immensely wealthy and powerful people had, that once they left this mortal coil, they were going to burn forever. So art is a way of trying to buy yourself into paradise. Once we've done that, once we've looked at Florence, then we're going to go further afield. We're going to look at symbolism in art. We're going to cast back to the ancient world and the Middle Ages. We're going to come forward to the Baroque, and we're going to go to other cities like Rome, like Siena, like Venice. We're going to cast around a lot, even north of the Alps as well. And this is all going to be with a view to human beings are naturally created to be creative. And there's no reason why anybody can't have a go at this sort of thing, and should do. So all of these shows are going to be an absolutely positive move to get people involved in creative pursuits.
That sounds wonderful. For me, it's always been music in my past. For most of my life, I've played flute. I've been interested in flutes. I've been a very dedicated classical music concert goer and listener for many years, and which brings me back to the column. Of course, our new magazine, which issues 1 and 2 are behind me here, and issue 3 will be coming out shortly, which I'm very happy you'll be contributing to, which I want to get to in a minute. But that's one of the things that I try to do as well, is I've been contributing reviews of music to the column in the culture section, which is kind of in the back of the magazine, to try to balance out all of the really heavy geopolitical, hard-hitting news articles which we have in the magazine, which are important to cover in the magazine as well as on the news programs. But I think you will all find that even if we're not public about it, most people at UK Column play some type of musical instrument. I won't go into details, but if you've been to some of our live events previously, you will have seen Brian playing violin and me playing flute. For me, it's usually after a few glasses of wine before I'll get in front of the audience, but and then I sound much better, obviously. But it is kind of that thing where if we can. We get asked a lot frequently, what can we do? This is also depressing. This is all, there's war and there's, control and the digital surveillance and all these things that are coming after us. Well, this is one way that I think we all need to be doing something not only to make ourselves sort of deal with it, and because it is so refreshing and so human to be part of humanist activities, if you want to call them humanism or artistic activities, but also I think it is a way to fight the things that are coming up against us. I'm really interested as well, having the privilege of being the commissioning editor for the column and looking at I've obviously read your article for the issue that will be coming out next month. Again, thank you for your contribution. One of the things that struck me, and I'm not going to go into detail about your article so that people actually buy the magazine, but one of the things that I found so interesting that I was thinking about quite a bit when you were talking about these, sort of these destructions and things that have happened in the past, and as you just said, powerful people being in control, is that it made me think that what we're seeing right now is not something new to human civilization. That there's always been powerful people putting things into play, trying to destroy things, even if they are things that they've benefited from. In your studies in art history, what have you thought about that at all, and what have you discovered in your research?
Well, in the alternative media circuit, you get people talking about a lot of ancient knowledge which has been deliberately destroyed. One example is the Great Library of Alexandria. It actually took centuries for the Great Library of Alexandria to cease to exist, and it was sort of collateral damage in various wars, and then it became a victim to religious dogma, and only then did the final manuscripts disappear. It wasn't some vast cataclysmic act unleashed by Julius Caesar, who simply decided, no, this has got to go. On the other hand, and this is something I touch on in the article, without going into details, yes, there are deliberate acts of destruction that have taken place over the centuries. Sometimes this is done to subjugate people in war. It's an overt sign of putting down the conquered. There's a statue, can't remember exactly where, found in the Middle East that was Roman, and they had just a head. It might even be a head of Caesar. It escapes me for the moment, and it was buried under somebody's front doorstep. And the idea was that every time they set foot in the house, they stepped on the enemy. So you can see the destruction of art can be something which is symbolic in that way. Statues smashed up and melted down for their raw materials. There's a lovely example of a sculpture of the Pope Julius II, made by Michelangelo, which was broken up and used to make cannon for the Duke of Ferrara. So works of art could be turned into weapons themselves. This is another thing that happened. But what I essentially do in the article, and people are going to have to buy the magazine to read it, is I compare one vast act of destruction that happened in the Middle Ages with what's happening in Western Asia now. And I make the point that both of them come from a build-up of geopolitical power, and both of them are deliberate acts of cultural destruction.
Oh, absolutely. I, for my PhD dissertation, I worked with photojournalism professionals that, kind of one of the major findings, which I didn't expect to find when I started it, was that they were really upset in some cases that the media or the newspapers that they worked for were using their work to lie to the public about what was going on, which was probably the most interesting finding from my PhD. But one of them that I spoke with had covered the invasion of Iraq in 2003 by the Americans and the British, of course. And one of the things that because he was there at the time, and one of the things that he observed happening were, Western soldiers coming in and destroying statues of, cultural, historical significance in Iraq. And, there was sort of like he didn't see the point of why was it that these people were doing these acts of destruction. This had nothing to do, well, we won't go into the whole why did we go into Iraq in the first place. We won't go there, but the issue of why were they destroying these, there was no reason for it. There was actually no political, tactical reason for them to coming in and destroying these statues. And so what some of the photojournalists who were there were trying to take pictures of these things before and after they were destroyed, just to document what was going on. And I'm sure we can see this in many places around the world. And it's a very interesting and unfortunate, of course, human behavior when we go into these kinds of places where we're destroying for really no logical reason. And it seems I'm seeing more and more as I used to get very depressed about the fact that this was happening now, but it looks like it's a cycle that's repeating itself. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. And looking at the way whole villages, towns and villages are now being bulldozed in southern Lebanon, is completely eradicating culture because churches are going with them. The thing which is often forgotten, which Vanessa Beeley covers admirably, is the number of Christian communities in that part of the world. And they are being absolutely eradicated.
Yes, that's true. And it's just to refer people back to some articles that Vanessa Beeley has written recently, as well as some of her colleagues who are based in Lebanon. Some of the coverage and some of the photos that are being shared they just show these acts of destruction, which obviously have no logical reason to be happening whatsoever. So I really feel the more that we can do to showcase these things is the most important thing that we can be doing for you and I, who have particular interest in culture and art. I think is one of the ways that we can fight the battle against the destruction of Western civilization, if you want to say it that way.
I think an important thing to say is, because I've studied destruction of Italian art during the Second World War, particularly what happened in Florence in 1944, and people shouldn't get the idea that I think that a building or a statue or a painting is more important than a person. The destruction of human life is the worst possible form of cultural destruction. But this comes together in what I'm going to be talking about in these shows, is that we are our culture. So the objects we create, they're part of us. Any artist, I mean, I'm sure Jake Fern on the column would agree, that when you create a work of art, these are your children. This is a form of creation where you are leaving something to posterity which is beyond yourself. So objects that human beings create are an extension of them, but they're a reflection of them as well. And if you remove the people themselves, those objects will never be made again. So the whole thing is all part of a whole. It's all integrated, that we have to look at us, our culture, together with the objects we create that reinforce that culture itself. So, destruction of art is terrible. Destruction of people is worse. but
Oh,
it's all part. It's all part of the same thing.
It certainly is, and the thing is that if we destroy what people have created, the people who came before us and our ancestors, in our whatever background we come from in any part of the world, then we are destroying their legacy as well, which is a horrible way for people who came before us that did all of the work that they did, and that is true in any place in the world. When I visited Saudi Arabia, it was in 2019, and there was a protected area outside of Riyadh, or kind of I don't know exactly where it was outside of Riyadh. There's a UNESCO protected area anyway that sort of like, here's what was here, here's what was created by the people, the sort of the long-time settlers before Islam took over and before these other things happened. And just, I took a bus tour sort of going around these areas, and you think, well, to us it just looks like it's just piles of sand and very primitive ways of living. But the thing is that was there far before any of these religious wars, any of these ideological wars, any of this happened. And people were just there living in the way that they could, and surviving off what was there in the land. And it really made me think a lot about, what we think about other cultures, other religions. Are we fighting Jews? Are we fighting Islamists? Who are we fighting? Like, none of these things are also, I believe, human created divisions as well. And that's not to say that wars didn't happen in the past, but when you look at what happened before we had all of these weapons and technologies and ways to destroy each other, and nuclear warfare and all of these mass destruction things, when people didn't have that ability, we survived for a very long time as humans before any of these things ever came about. And I think that's also an important thing to remember.
Well, I was reading an article this morning on Martin Armstrong's website about, I think, outages of power. Or it might have been zero hedge, doesn't matter. About what would happen if, we get some massive internet outage or the power goes out. Mm-hmm. And if you wind back to the periods I study when these artworks were being created, there was no electricity. What would have happened to them? Nothing. Precisely zero would have happened. And this is why this digital world we built. Okay, we're using it now. We're communicating between two different countries, and this is going to go out to people all over the world. That's great. Mm-hmm. That takes me back to using a hammer as a tool. This software, the computer I'm using, the computer you're using, this microphone, they're just hammers. They are used to create something. But we should not be dependent upon them to live. So, getting out there personally, seeing what you did, get on a bus tour, go and see, even if it looks like piles of sand, try and get your head around it, try and understand it, and immerse yourself in it. So avoid this homogenization of the world. I'll give you one of the things that drew me towards, because I live in Italy, in Piedmont, one of the things that drew me here originally was TV cookery shows. So we're going to take a slight detour here. You do music, I do food. Okay? I cook. And I came to live here because of the food, the weather, the ladies, it has to be said, and the wine. And I got that from watching people like the sainted Keith Floyd. Remember, I don't know if you're familiar with Keith Floyd, a TV chef. Interesting character, incredibly entertaining. And watching his shows of countries like Italy, like Spain, drew me to come here. But that is exactly that. That is exploring another culture to enjoy that culture. And for various reasons, because the place I grew up in was never home to me. Here's an interesting thing. The Italians have two separate words for home. They have casa for house, and turn it on its head. We have house and home in English. They're two separate things. The house is the structure. The home is where you're born, is where you grow up. For the Italians, it's all embodied in one word, casa. And the place I grew up in, house was never home. House was never home. So I needed to find a home to live in, and that's why I came here. And I discovered that in person through those TV shows. I wanted to come and experience another culture, and as I said, when I saw Florence, I fell in love with the country so much, I thought, I want to live there, and I do. That's it. But this is personally experiencing the food, the wine, the art, the architecture. This is getting out there and getting your feet planted on the ground in a place and experiencing it, whether it's piles of sand or Renaissance paintings. Makes no difference. And I'd say to the people watching this, with regard to museums in the UK and America and anywhere in the world where you happen to be watching, yes, looking at works of art online, yep, that's great. The photography you can download from a lot of museums like the Met in New York is absolutely wonderful. But it is never a substitute for going and seeing the paint or the marble or the bronze. You have to go and see it in the flesh, if you like, and then you'll understand what it's about. Photography and digital photography will never, ever capture the reality of it, the beauty of it. Never. So you've got to get out there and see it yourself.
Yeah, that is certainly something to emphasize. My first visit to the UK was 2008, and I was invited to attend and speak at a conference in Oxford. And but my first time sort of across on this side of the pond was 1993. When I finished high school, I was dating someone from Denmark, and as you can tell by my surname Rasmussen, I have some Danish ancestry myself, if you couldn't guess. So it was, it was funny because I was over here in Denmark and spent the summer in Denmark, and I really honestly didn't want to go back across the pond again because I just loved experiencing a place, a culture that had a much longer history than the one that I was born in. And really just didn't give up, obviously, until I moved over here permanently, which ended up being in Scotland back in 2015, and haven't left since and have no intention of doing so. That first visit to Oxford, being in that sort of what to me felt like an intellectual heavyweight setting, coming over when then I was still a relatively young academic in 2008, being around what felt like hundreds of years of history of, this was written here, and the pubs and the whole scenery, really made me want to come back. So I came back 2 years later to Cambridge, or maybe it was 1 year later. And then I was like, I have to find a way to move over there because I just wanted to be in a place where it felt like there was such a historical foundation of having that long-standing sense of place, of knowing people who know where their families came from, whereas in America nobody knows really. In a lot of cases, a lot of people are a mix of everything. I was relatively lucky in the fact that my grandfather came over from Denmark, and so I can trace that back relatively easily. But not everyone even has that. So when it comes to a sense of home or a sense of place, are Americans Americans? Are they identifying, if you want to get into that identity politics, identifying by the country where their ancestors came from, which in some cases is several people? But I really find that having this ability, even now living in the northeast of England, to be able to go to visit places that have been around for hundreds or thousands maybe of years, and they can still be visited and still exist and still have an impact on just everyday life, just being around these things. I think that maybe is something that people who don't come from America may not realize. It's not normal for most of us to just leave our house in the morning and get in the car and pass by a castle on the way to work. It just doesn't it doesn't happen that way for everyone, and I think it's easy to lose sight of that. And
if I lean slightly to the right, I can see one.
See, exactly.
Out of my window, yeah. Well, now you obviously come from literature, and here's an example of seeing literature read in tooth and claw and really being face to face with history. You talked about coming over to this side of the Atlantic and seeing history right in your face. Yeah. I went to an exhibition in the Accademia in Florence, which is the museum that houses Michelangelo's David. And it was about Dante. And Dante was exiled from Florence,
Mm-hmm.
and he was sentenced initially to death by burning as a heretic. And the book with that sentence of death in it was on display. It's called Il Libro del Chiodo, the Book of the Nail, because there is a nail embedded in the leather cover for some reason. So this is where you could get that close to the poet himself. You could actually see the pages of the book with his death sentence written out on them. Just so you know, this brings you face to face with him as a real person. Absolutely, astonishing stuff.
I'm currently working on a review of a new Mozart recording of the Requiem and the Great Mass in C minor, which will appear in the next issue of the column. And just because I go down these rabbit holes, just because they add to the content, but also just from my own interest, to be able to find, without being able to get over to Vienna myself, it was interesting to find the original scans of Mozart's own writing of the scores, and to see where, like in the case of the Requiem and the Great Mass in C minor, they're both unfinished works that got finished by other people at a later date, and to see the original scans of what Mozart wrote and where the unfinished parts were. Maybe there were just a few lyrics for the choir, or unfinished notes in the different parts in the orchestra. To see that yourself, it's not the same as seeing it in a computer, but when you go, when you are face to face with something like that, and it's right in front of you, like Mozart or Dante or whoever it was that we learn about from our past, is when it's right in front of you. There's no substitute for that kind of feeling. It's just you're right. It's right in your face. It's incredible.
Well, the one of the best collections of arms and armour in the world is in Vienna. So I used to go there and work a fair bit. And the first time I went there, because I had only just before watched the film Amadeus. Yeah, I know it's a film, it's fiction. I know.
It is.
But but that led me to Mozart's music, and that first time I went to Vienna, I went to the Figaro House, which is now a museum where he wrote The Marriage of Figaro.
Yeah.
And to walk around the rooms, on the same wooden floors that were there when he was there, again, face to face with history, absolutely, staring it right in the eye.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. My background was in my undergrad degree was in Spanish. So that we could go into how I got into where I am, but now it's a long story. But learning Spanish and reading things in the original Spanish language, even in translation, if you were to read Borges or Marquez or any of the the great Spanish authors and poets that we know from both the other side of the pond as well as originally from Spain. There's no substitute from reading it in the original language, because I think even in language, something gets lost in the translation. So we can talk about looking at a scan or a photo of a piece of, a sculpture or a painting online. But I think it's the same with literature, that there is still a translation that happens between translating from Spanish to English, just like your example of the words for home in Italian. It's the same passion and the same fire that you get in the Romance language. It doesn't exist in the English language.
Yeah.
And so I think by going back and forth, you also you lose some of that. So I'm not saying everyone should go learn Spanish, but again, it's that idea of getting as close as you can to the original intent of the creator, that sometimes we as listeners, as audience, we have to do some work ourselves to get the most from that. And I would even actually extend that to UK column audience members, going back to the column, and I've heard Brian say this as well, is that, we can provide you with the information, we can tell you what's going on in the world, but ultimately, as a news organization, it's the job of the audience to do what they want to do with that, and that whether that means getting out and going to a museum, or participating in activism, or whatever cause it is that you want to take on, and whatever you want to do, that is up to you as a UK column member. That we can't do that for anyone. So I think that needs to be part of what happens here as well in the column, and when it comes to even interacting with culture, but also what are we doing, what part are we taking in the world, what action are we taking. We love it that you listen to us 3 times a week and watch the podcast and buy the magazine, but ultimately that is up to individuals to do something with that. So
Well, I'm hoping there's two things here. Firstly, with regard to the original language, people who buy my books, I do this particularly in the book about the Battle of San Romano, or the three paintings. I use Italian a lot, and I explain it. So as you go through a book like that, you begin to understand the words yourself.
Yeah.
The idea is to get people to embrace the culture as they go through the book. One example I use is people's nicknames. They're called it's called a sopranome here, an overname. People get nicknames based on their appearance, on what their families or fathers have done, what they do, where they come from, all sorts of things. A good example of that is when I was back in Britain, because I used to talk about Italy so much, the people in the local pub in Suffolk used to call me the Italian. now I'm here in Italy, I'm the Englishman. So you see, I have my own form of sopranome. But this is what we're going to do in these shows. We're going to take you, the audience, with us and bring you into this amazing culture, take you a long way back in time, sometimes thousands of years back in time. And the idea is to enthuse you to carry that on, to pick up that baton and run with it and go and find out more for yourself, do more research for yourself, come over here, come to other countries in Europe and actually experience the culture for yourself and learn and grow from it. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully do something with that yourselves. Even if it's only enjoy reading about these things or watching the shows, but just to take something positive from them and just take it forward, go with it. That's what we want to do.
That's I wish you had been around a little bit more, well, at all in 2020, because that was one of my escapes when I couldn't leave the house, was watching travel channels on YouTube, and especially because I've visited several countries in my lifetime and hope to visit more, obviously. But one of the things when I wasn't supposed to leave the house is that I would do is watch some of these travel videos or read books of probably places I still wouldn't even visit, even now that I'm allowed to do so, because that was just my escape. In my case, where places that things like Papua New Guinea. For example, there was a book of a woman that I read about where she was actually going out, not just into sort of the what's the name of the largest city in Papua New Guinea, but it's kind of into the wilderness and all of the things that can kill you and all of the tribal people that probably want to kill you, and that she was out there as a white woman herself, just going out and facing all of it, and completely, in my opinion, had absolutely no fear in doing any of it. And so those are the things where, even if they're not something that I can do myself, people who might have health problems, might be older, might be bound to family obligations, can't go anywhere. Even these things that we can bring to you on UK Column and elsewhere is still a way for you to at least have that sort of mental escape, that even if you are not able to go out, what we hope we can do with your series and anything else that we do culturally is something that can still take you to another place, even if it's in your mind and that's all you can do. It still relieves you of that heavy burden that we can get just dealing with the stress of everyday life, whatever is going on for any of us. And I think that's something that art does so well for people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, traveling vicariously through the UK column is something we want to encourage.
Straight to Plymouth. No.
Yeah. One thing, just to comment on that. When I still lived in the UK, I used to go to the National Gallery in London, the Sainsbury. Let me say that again. The Sainsbury wing, where all the Italian art is, the Italian Renaissance, medieval art, and it was like taking a bath or a shower, if you like. I felt refreshed when I'd done it. And then just back out into you might say the real world again afterwards, but it was lovely just to be able to do that for an hour. I used to go and, if you like, make friends with a new painting every time I went in. I made a point of going into a gallery I hadn't seen before, try and find a painting I hadn't seen before, and get to know it. So this was a conscious effort to always learn something new, pick up something new. And it's all, the Italians have a lovely expression. They say, tutto fa brodo. Everything makes soup. The idea is everything is another ingredient which you can add, which enriches the experience. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to present the UK column audience with a nice brodo.
If I can talk a little bit about my summer experiences, I was away for 2 weeks in July this year. My first time abroad in a very long time. I went to Lanzarote in the Canary Islands for 2 weeks, and I really wanted to make sure that I saw as much of the island as possible. Luckily, with my knowledge of Spanish, I was able to maybe do a little bit more than I would have otherwise. But just getting on some day tours and saw the volcanoes and learned a lot about the history of the island, so sort of what happened before the volcanoes, which I don't know how much you know about the geography of Lanzarote, but it was, it's a volcanic island, and the volcanoes basically destroyed and everything a few hundred years ago. And I bought a book about what island life was like there. And when you think about how remote the Canary Islands are, it's only, I think it's 78 miles from the coast of the African continent, from where we were in Arrecife and Lanzarote. But thinking about what was life like then, even before they had, the ability to get on. And I was Newcastle to Arrecife in 4.5 hours, right? That wasn't the case in 1600. Right. So how did people survive in that climate? Very hot at the equator, no resources, no access to anything. And the book that I found, which was mentioned in one of the museums that I visited, was a first-hand account from a religious figure, a minister who was there or I guess it was a priest, whatever, was there at the time. And he documented what happened with the volcano and what happened to the people that were in his religious community and what happened from there. And so when you think about what life must have been like back then, when they brought it, before they had camels, before they had all of the things that made life a little bit less remote, despite the remoteness of the tiny island. Just going back into time during my holiday. I mean, I did have my days on the beach with the pool, with the drink. You did that too, but also let's give this a little bit of substance. Let's learn a bit as well, because I think if you just stay in the resort the whole time, you get a terrible sunburn and you drink too much, which is fine. There's a place for that, but there's also a place for, what can I learn here? This is a completely different culture. I may never have this chance again. So it really is all about, I think, how we approach those times when we can be released of our daily duties and just go experience somewhere else. And it always changes you as a person. You incorporate those experiences. Having lived in several countries in my life, even before I arrived here, and several states within America and in Canada, and time in Australia and everywhere I've been, I certainly am not the same person that I would have been if I'd stayed in the same place my whole life. And it's given me a unique life, but it certainly has taught me a lot, and I think has led me to be able to do the journalism and the editing work that I do for the column now.
It's incidentally a slight aside here for volcanologists. As we're recording this, Etna is kicking off down in the south here, big time. Catania Airport's been closed for a while. Been continual activity for 7 days, which is quite high. So let's come and see Italy while it's still here.
Let me check the prices on the planes right now. See if I can get another week off.
Talking about a travel as you were and how people managed a long time ago. Remember, people did travel in the Middle Ages. Pilgrims walked thousands of miles. We have one of the main pilgrim routes comes through here, not far from where I am, the Via Francigena. Came down, heading towards Rome, and people did travel huge distances on foot. And of course, the merchant class regularly travelled long distances, so people did get around, even thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that was something I had to read in high school. I had to read the Canterbury Tales, so I started learning that version of English, just to kind of be able to read them in the original language, which are, I was sort of in a very advanced literature class in high school, but our teacher forced us to learn a little bit of that original version of English as well as Beowulf and Old English, and again, even though they are earlier forms of English, you're still learning, more of that original feeling, that original intent, that, everything that when we encounter a body of literature or a body of art, work of art, obviously our own experiences are going to be put into how we interpret that piece of work, but also you can, I think, get closer to maybe what that original intent was of the creator by going back into that original language, as we were saying earlier. I'm just about running out of time here, unfortunately. This has gone very quickly. This has been great. I did have a question in the back of my mind that I wanted to ask you, because you said you're in Italy and you love food, as I do. I knew an Italian woman once who also loved food, and one time she told me that there is actually no such thing as what the British call spaghetti bolognese. Is that true or false?
It's absolutely true. It's pasta alla ragu. It's tagliatelle. It's noodles, flat noodles, egg noodles eaten with a meat sauce. So no, they don't eat it with spaghetti, and no, it's not bolognese. It doesn't exist. It's a pure invention.
Okay, that's what she told me. The other thing that I learned from this woman was, and I think I would have to get this imported, or maybe you can arrange to hook some up for me, was this stuff called pocket coffee, which is it's like espresso syrup on the inside, so it's got a good hit of caffeine and chocolate on the outside. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but I highly recommend it because she used to hook me up with some back when I knew her. It's called pocket coffee. So
I don't know the name. I'll have to look. Piedmont is a very heavily chocolatized part of Italy, and it's where Ferrero Rocher. It's where the Ferrero family come from, and there's a type of drink called bicherin, which is coffee which you drink through chocolate and whipped cream.
That sounds amazing.
Exactly. And just quickly, I know we're running out of time, but this is the other thing to remind people of, is Italy is a very young country. It's only existed for about 160 years. So you have to remember that these were all city-state individual countries up until then. And that's why they had their own languages, dialects. Modern Italian comes from Tuscan. It was born with Dante. And, here, for example, lots of people speak dialect. If I'm walking around the town here, I hear people speaking dialect, which contains a lot of French. You go up into the mountains, then it's another dialect again. And so just remember, you get different dishes. I mean, the food of this area is nothing like the food of Tuscany. It's nothing like the food of Naples or of Sicily. It's all different. So just remember that in the same way that spaghetti bolognese doesn't exist, you could also say Italian cooking doesn't exist. Italian regional cooking, yes, it does. But there is no Italian kitchen, as it were.
I had a student once who used to supply me with, she told me about it, and then I found it at Tesco, I think, was the Montepulciano red wine, which I think it's my favorite wine, I think. Just beautiful, beautiful wine. So is there anything else? I know we've covered quite a bit. It's been a great discussion, but I always give my guests the option to share anything else with the audience that we didn't have a chance to cover already.
Okay, well, the first thing is to repeat that come along with us on the journey we're going to make back into the past. Come and experience the wonderful art of the Renaissance, the Middle Ages, and even going back into the ancient world and then forward into the Baroque, starting with Florence, and then we'll move out from there. If people want to know more about what I do, they can come to my website, which is Chris Dobson, all one word, chrisdobson.it for Italy. So chrisdobson.it, and you'll find more about me there and about my publications. And I think you're going to put in the show notes, shall we say, some links to some more, some deeper background information about how I came to the column, as it were.
I will do. Yes. We'll put all those as well as the link to your website in the show notes. And and I would just say on a note, I have been able to have an advanced look at your book, and I really highly recommend it. I haven't finished it yet, but it is so far a fascinating read with, of course, beautiful images of all of the things that you'll be showing us. So, but thank you again for your time today, Chris. I'm really looking forward to the series, and I do hope that you'll be showing us some food along with some beautiful art as you take us through.
Yes, and some wine.
Absolutely fabulous. Well, thank you again, and again, if you can buy issue 3 of the column, which will be coming out in September of 2026, your first piece for us will be as a feature article in that magazine, and we'll put the other links to other things in the show notes. So thank you again for your time, Chris. I'm looking forward to so much more from you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, pleasure. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you're enjoying this programme, you can help us bring more news, articles, comment and interviews to more people. It's your support that makes our coverage possible. Our goal for 2026 is for 10,000 new members. Join a worldwide community of UK Column supporters on our website or alternatively on Substack or YouTube.